Let's talk about how a few years ago, the king and the other brother were taking victory laps in the press when Harry and Meghan left. There were briefings, there was smug framing, they chose to go, they couldn't adapt. The firm survived. It was presented as discipline, as strength, as unity, as the monarchy protecting itself from two disruptive outliers. But here's the problem with that narrative. You cannot aggressively police two working royals for image, for tone, for boundaries and media management while simultaneously claiming ignorance about Andrew. This defies institutional logic, in my opinion. This is not about whether the king and the other brother personally approved of Andrew's behavior. I like to think that they didn't. I would like to think so. But that is a distraction. Institutions do not operate on personal feelings. They operate on risk, containment, and exposure. And Andrew was the biggest reputational liability the monarchy has faced in modern times. Ha ha! Not Harry, not Meghan, Andrew. Andrew is their biggest reputational risk. He is a liability. And the worst thing they did was close ranks around him because boy, oh boy, chickens are coming home to roost. But let's carry on. By the time Harry and Meghan were frozen out, by the time Harry and Meghan were sidelined and publicly framed as being the problem, Andrew's associations with Jeffrey Epstein were already known to them internally. These were not rumored, they were not speculative, they were known, like they knew that Andrew had a solid friendship with this guy because we had photographs, we had settlements, we had the legal strategy, and the fact that money was authorized at the highest level to make the problem go away. Ha ha! That alone collapses. Oh, but we didn't know. Yeah, that collapses that firewall. I'm sorry, but it does. And because at the end of the day, you do not authorize a multi-million pound settlement without knowing what you are insulating against. And yet, look at the contrast. Harry and Meghan were treated as a containment threat because they spoke, because Meghan didn't submit to bad behavior. And I remember the press was even running articles like, if you don't bend, you will break. And they were saying it so proudly and so smugly. But thankfully, she left. She left because Harry named dynamics that had always been hidden. They were portrayed as unstable, ungrateful, and disloyal. The institution mobilized against Harry and Meghan with breathtaking speed and coordination. So if they can do that to Harry and Meghan, why didn't they do it to Andrew? That is the question people are asking. Andrew, in the meantime, he was protected. He was slowly, quietly, and structurally absorbed into the system. Now, they talk about title removal, but I keep saying this, his titles have not been removed. He only agreed not to use them. There's a massive difference. For titles to be removed, it takes an act of parliament. It has to go through parliament in the House of Lords and blah, blah. I spoke about that many videos ago. So, access for him was only cut short because of public outrage, because the public were like, hello, what are you doing? Even then, the language, and I always tell you, please note the language, even then the language they used around him in the press was very careful. They said words like stepping back. They said words like private citizen. They never ever even touched his daughters. It was like, oh, the poor girls. Oh, they're not responsible for what their dad did. And yet Harry and Meghan, not only were Harry and Meghan slated, their children, as in their babies, were slated. There was never any moral condemnation for Andrew, never institutional accountability, and there was never any clarity around him. That is not confusion, that is prioritization, because they decided to prioritize Andrew and his feelings and his standing and the institution's feelings and standing against everything else. And for me, that is where the real crime sits, because it's not just in what Andrew did, it's in what the institution chose to defend and who the institution chose to defend. Because if the king and his heir were capable of orchestrating all those press briefings, those narratives, those moral signaling against Harry and Meghan, then they were absolutely aware that Andrew was being shielded at the same time. You do not run a communications machine that powerful and that big in one direction while being blind in the other direction. Power doesn't work that way. What happened instead was a trade-off. Harry and Meghan became the lightning rod. They were the distraction in the press, the endless soap opera that consumed column inches. It gave the press something to do. It gave them an opportunity to make loads and loads and loads of money. People were able to focus their outrage on Harry and Meghan. They were able to dissect their every move, question their character. And while that noise was filling the air as a distraction, Andrew's story was getting buried and buried and buried, and it might resurface slowly, maybe once in a while, and then it gets pushed down again until, unfortunately, that is no longer viable. And I remember many of us noticed it in real time, and we said something about it. And for me, that timing was never accidental. It was deliberate. So institutions have a habit of sacrificing the truth to protect hierarchy. They don't ask, what is the right thing to do? They ask, what is a bigger threat to us? So is Harry and Meghan leaving a bigger threat? Or is Andrew's shenanigans surfacing? Is that the bigger threat? That is what they sit down and do when they're doing their strategy meetings, when they're hiring their PR crisis people. So a disgraced spare with legal exposure threatens the crown structurally. A popular biracial duchess with a voice threatens it symbolically, and institutions fear symbolic disruption more than they do moral failure, because symbolism actually destabilizes loyalty. Because now that many of us see Meghan as a symbol of someone who has been wronged, she is gathering many supporters on a daily basis, even people that do not like her. They even admit occasionally that, well, maybe she wasn't as bad as what we thought. They do that occasionally. And I've seen people comment. I've seen it. So that is why they want to destroy her, because she is a symbol. And they hate symbolism. And remember, this family, this institution is all about the optics. So yeah. The monarchy, they knew to act, and they chose who to protect and who to punish. And sadly, chickens have come home to roost. My name's Elizabeth. I'm the author of The Luxpreneur. And for more insights like these, please like, share, comment, and follow me. And to support my work, yes, I do need support. Please get a copy of my book, The Luxpreneur, from Amazon, or you can order it via Barnes & Noble if you do not like Amazon. And you can also order it through Waterstones.